Morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Strategy, Policy and Growth Development Committee meeting. Actually, Strategy, Growth and Planning. Welcome to members of public. Welcome to councillors and staff. Before we into the agenda, I'll just remind everyone that this is being recorded for posterity, as it were. So before we kick off, I'll just bring us together with a reflection, and it's a poem by Khalil Gibran entitled "Fear." It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has travelled, from the peaks of the mountains and the long winding road crossing forests and villages. And in front of her, she sees an ocean so vast that to enter there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean, because only then will fear disappear. Because that's where the river will know it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. You may have wondered why I chose that, but given a couple of the topics on our agenda today around what the future might look like and how we cannot go back, I thought it was appropriate. Okay, so welcome everyone, and I understand there are no formal apologies, Ellie. Public forum, we have Mr. Tony Rhodes, who in my discussion with him, he would like to speak with us. So please come forward, Tony, and you know how to use the...
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome.
Use the button.
Yeah, sorry. Well, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. Reading through the agenda for today, I came across the district strategy that obviously quite a bit of time has been spent in preparation of. And I'd like to make a few comments in respect to that, just to highlight a few points. I see on the agenda that it's up for acceptance or review and final review and acceptance by council, or by this group and then to council. I'd urge you not to accept it at this stage. My reasons are these. I think basically there are some quite significant, what I can only describe as errors and omissions in it. I think there's some aspects that are covered in it that are quite frankly outside the realm of council. And there are omissions around what I think are some of the core functions of council that are not reflected in the aspects that are reported in here. Let me illustrate that, and I'll go through it slowly so you can get a feel of what I'm looking at. If you turn to page 65 of that document,
On the thriving district.
so it's a thriving district, the right-hand side, strategic objective and measures. Talks about more people living in our district, third bullet point on the first box on the right. To ensure sustainable growth, nowhere does it really talk about housing in there. At the bottom, it talks about increased agricultural production. The bottom box, it talks about increased agricultural production, decreased pollution in rivers and streams, and diversification of the use of whenua. I'd suggest that increased agricultural production has nothing to do with council's responsibility. It's not something you have a direct responsibility for. Decreasing pollution in the rivers and streams, you have a direct impact on that in terms of your wastewater effluent system. There should be some mention around what some objectives are or some measures in there might be in terms of reduced output, BOD level, I don't know. reduced volume of output, reduced discharge, in fact, discharge to land. There's nothing, and I'll come on to it later on, around water take and water intakes. We continue over on page 69. You're talking about measures around improving our environment. Our carbon footprint is reduced. I'm not certain what you're talking about. You're talking about the council's footprint. What we should be talking about here is the carbon footprint and emissions directly associated with council, for example, vehicle use. I assume you have a figure now of the existing level of greenhouse gas emissions from council operations per annum, and you've got measures of that, and you should be putting some measures in there that say that how much of a reduction that will be, or when it will be carbon zero. There's nothing about your waste management, the green waste, recycling. Water consumption, to be reducing household water consumption from 300 litres per household per day to 180 or whatever. I don't know what the figure is, but there's nothing about sustainable water management in terms of our potable water supply and our great stormwater and our black water. Nothing about increased recycling at all aspects. Those are just two examples that I wanted to make of aspects of measures that are in here that I think are inappropriate. And I think the thing needs to be gone through again and looked at. There's a whole lot of community comments that are, for example, pages 62, 63. These community comments from community, they're pictorially illustrated on, for example, Voices of the Community and Thriving District, 62, 63. I don't see those comments reflected in measures anywhere, or actions, or activities, or aspirations anywhere. You've got them there. They're pretty, but ineffective. So I think this document needs to be looked at very carefully before anyone adopts it. It's a 2050 strategic plan or strategy, and I think it's quite frankly.
Does any councillors have any questions for Tony before he asks the list? Councillor John.
Thank you, Sharon. I hear what you say, Tony, but most of those comments are a general comment in the direction in which we're going, without getting down into specifics like how many litres of water per household. I mean, where do you stop when you get down to those sorts of specifics? So aims are reasonably clear in that DG cleaner water in the rivers. Now, there are a lot of things that need to be done and are planned to be done to reduce the degradation of the waterways through discharges and so on. But you'd have a very, very heavy document if you got down to specifics, not everything that we would be doing in due course.
You're correct. I'm not asking for all those details to be in there. What I'm saying is that there's no way anyone looking at this at any point in the future could look at it and say, well, tell me what you've done, or tell me what you were going to do and what you've actually achieved. It's so non-specific, it's meaningless. There's not even a reference to some of those aspects of what council's responsibility in relation to water quality is. You have a responsibility around the effluent discharges and waste management. I think that should be referenced. I mean, you should take responsibility for what you're doing, and that should be alluded to or detailed. I'm not saying that you're going to say that it's getting it down to a BOD level of 180, and you're going to reduce the daily volume to I don't know, 1 million litres or something like that. I'm not asking for that detail there, but that'll be in other action plans that you're going to have elsewhere in other documents, and in your 5-year, 10-year plans. But this is your strategy document to 2050, and it didn't even say tightly the areas you're going to be working in, you're going to be focusing on. I think it could be tightened up a lot. So yes, you're right. But those general comments, they should, if they're not meaningful, those community comments are not meaningful, why have them in there?
Tony, Brian, do you wish to make a comment?
Thank you, Chair Sharon. Just on a couple of comments. I think, Tony, what you're not seeing is the total strategic. What you're not seeing there is the total strategic framework that we operate within. So the strategy, district strategy, and it's not council strategy, it's district strategy, which is for the entire district. But within that, it actually helps inform other key documents that may have the things that you're asking for, i.e. LTP, that will list more sort of the outcomes we're after, but the LTP will be linked to our district strategy. Some of the waste minimisation stuff, so we're currently working through the waste minimisation plan, but that will also make sure it's referenced and linked to the district strategy. So a lot of the questions that you have asked or comments that you've provided will be there in council's documents, but we wouldn't always, as Councillor Peter said, put them in the one document. And you said, you know, that's also unreasonable. What are the actions? You will see the actions come out of a range of other documents that we produce. Housing, for instance, it was a bit before the cart before the horse, but that we do have a housing strategy, and we needed to ensure that they were linked as well. No district strategy will be ever perfect, because there'll be so many range of views that individuals have that you won't be able to nail down everything in the document. But what we've talked about around this table is that it is a live document. Things will change and we need to be nimble. So even though we say this is for 2050, in 5 years' time, 2050 could look different again based on what's happening around an environment. So it will be regularly updated through different parts of different review periods, certainly around the LTP periods as well. So although it doesn't hit every nail on the head, it's a good starting document. It is the district's first district strategy, and it's certainly something that I believe we can build on with comments, and none of your comments were wrong. It's just that they are found within other documents as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for taking the time to come here, because we certainly value your big picture view on what's happening within our district. So appreciate that. You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. So we'll take on board your thoughts on that one. Right. So thank you, everyone. Is there any notification of items that on the agenda that anyone wishes to? Okay. Any conflicts of interest in relation to today's meeting? Anyone? Right. So let's confirm the minutes from our previous meeting held on the 4th of July. Can I please have a mover that they were Councillor Gilmore, Councillor Chase? All those in favour? Right, let's go page by page, please. So on my paper document, it's page 3, page 4. I have a comment there, perhaps through you, Adele. On page 4, members were asked to provide the team with key contacts in the community. And I just want to make sure that we are touching base with those key contacts. Is anyone able to confirm? I know in particular Shannon had been asked to touch base with Mr. Rhodes and Phil. Yep. So can we please have confirmation that that's happened?
I know it's reached out to Phil.
Okay. Okay, please. Page 5. Page 6. Do we have to move the recommendation, Ellie? We've done that. Yep. Right, we're good to go. Right, so let's move into the reports stage. And so item 7.1, everyone, is the Tararua Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategy. So this was a piece of work undertaken a wee while ago. And to my knowledge, this is the first time this has come before any of us on council. So I'm very keen that each of us as an individual comment on the contents of this document. And so to that end, I'll probably start with you, Councillor Wallace, as to your input when you reviewed it and regarding any feedback that you might have, recognising this is a draft version. It's the first time we've seen it, so.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Sharon. I don't see anything about pipe bands, brass bands or jazz bands or anything musical, organ. Do you realise we've got I think it's London's top organist residing in Dannevirke now, plays in the Anglican Church. So, yeah, music, nothing on music.
Yeah, I have a lot of concerns with that as to where all this money's coming from and all the grants that they're asking for. And a lot of their trusts. I actually have a lot of concerns with this. We need to actually mention right now, but
You won't be alone,
I just found it was a bit dictatorial too, and a bit like, where's all this money coming from? How are we going to allocate the money? Are you asking, like, I don't even know if this is what the community wants. So I actually have a lot of concerns with this.
I did want to get a sense of where it's the first time that all of us have seen this, so thank you, Councillor Chase. Councillor Petty Weber.
Yeah, I'm a little bit with Steve. There's quite a few gaps and quite a few people that haven't been talked to. And I think, yeah, there wasn't enough consultation, just the way I've read it. There's key groups in here that haven't been tapped into. So I think, yeah, a bit more consultation with each community and even out to the coast. Yeah, there's quite a bit missing.
To sing that song, Where Do I Begin? I have read this before and I have got a copy at home, and I've got to say that it is a very poor document. The first reaction on reading it was what wasn't included. For example, just our museums, I mean, they didn't even talk to the Dannevirke Museum. I think personally that the person who wrote this was well out of their depth in terms of what was really required. I don't know how they were briefed at the beginning, but personally, I think this is probably could be added to, who was it the other day that said, oh, Adele, we'll start the fire with it. I just think it's a very poor document that it's got to be completely redone.
You Alice?
I haven't read it. I haven't got a hard copy.
Oh, okay. You don't need to.
I do.
Councillor Long.
Thank you. I too was concerned about the funding. I thought it was a large document. It repeated itself in areas. I wasn't impressed at all with it. I was really disappointed. Yep. Thank you.
Sutherland.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. Councillor Ellie said she'd read it before. Well, I don't know whether it's popped up before. That's a first. I've never seen it, but I thought this has just popped up now. But I think you can go through it and find lots of areas of concern about costing and community buildings and things, and I can understand that someone's just done a snapshot and dropped this on us. and there's funding and there's staffing and there's community buildings. Well, it could be critical, all that, but I guess I'm not sure, have we ever had a culture heritage strategy? I don't know, this might be the first cut. I do recall we did get some funding.
We did.
Yeah, so it's a freebie, isn't it? So it's a freebie, but so perhaps we have got a document that we can make a start with, that we can. Well, I don't think the community's probably had too much of a bite of this by the looks of things. We haven't, so we could sort of throw it out with the bathwater, but I think no one's going to provide another $30,000 to anyone to make a start again. I think it's something we could start with and use probably. But that's all I've really got to say. I mean, you can go through and pick little bits about it, who pays, what we do, 1% of this and this. You know, there's a lot of staff to be funded in there, 300 or 400 grand a year perhaps, is looked at. And I suppose if we got, you know, if the aspirations in there with music added, it could be a wonderful thing. If we got the gold-plated version, but there are things to worry you, but I'm not going to break my neck over it. I think it's here when someone else has paid for it, so we use the good stuff in it and move ahead perhaps with it. Yeah.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm in agreement with most in the room. I was pretty disappointed when I first read this document, to be frank. I think it's important to say I have a belief that we do need to have an arts strategy. And so I think that's really important. And I've heard that from a number of members of our community, that this is very, very, very much needed. Unfortunately, though, what they're wanting to achieve from it is not really captured within this document. I'm really concerned about the consultation. This is someone who has done a piece of work, but I really see it and read it as one person's opinion. That's the way it really, really came through. And I think that we would be remiss if we were to adopt a strategy based off one person's opinion. There are a couple of ideas in there that I think have some merit. They were talking about a stock take of our museums and looking at a central store, and I know that there could be some appetite for that. But one great idea a strategy does not make. So I'm not going to go back through all of the other concern ideas that people have raised, but I absolutely do agree with those and back them. My view on this particular strategy, reiterating that I think we do need to have one, is that it is fundamentally flawed, and I don't think that we actually would be able to go through and fix this up to a stage that it would actually be of benefit to our community. So to foreshadow, Madam Chair, once everyone has had their say, I certainly will be happy to move that we receive this, but that we reject it.
Thank you. Councillor Noel. Councillor Peter, I know you.
Thank you, Chair. I know that this document, I mean, I've read the document, but it's been lying in a drawer somewhere for quite some time because it was deemed to be useless, and but it needed to be brought before council to either reject it or accept it or whatever, and this is, I guess, what we're doing. There has been movement by the various museums in the district, primarily brought about by the initiative of Bruce Hutton, to get together, and they plan to get together and meet. They may have already done it, I'm not sure, to discuss their respective thoughts, desires, issues that they've got, with a view to talking to council about what they think should happen with the museums in the district, and discussing things like a central repository for a lot of stuff and a lot of the junk that they all recognise that their museums are full of junk, and they need to perhaps focus on different aspects of history in the district, but have a central repository for a lot of the stuff, and then have displays of different things in their own towns. But that's something that will no doubt come to us in due course. And I think that's a good initiative on the part of well, Bruce initially, but also the other museum committees. But I'm with you, Councillor Gilmore. The document as it is should be perhaps received. Leave it at that. Not adopted.
Any further comments, Councillor Franklin?
I just wanted to apologise. Yeah, I was actually given a copy of this well over a year ago. Well over 18 months ago, at least it would be. And I know that there was certainly concern around the document, and I wonder whether that's why it ended up in a drawer somewhere and it's gone on the little bit of a too hard file. I have asked for this to be brought to our committee, to the Community Development and Wellbeing Committees on a number of occasions, and I'm so grateful that it has arrived here today, because I guess again, where does that sit? You know, it sits in strategy. So thank you for that, Adele.
Councillor Sutherland.
Madam Chair, I just wondered, just a matter of interest, this had to go to Creative New Zealand to fund part of the fulfill part of the funding side of it. Has there been any feedback from them about this? I just wonder whether they just receive it and say, thanks, you've got the money and on your bike, or did they have some comment about it as well?
Dale, are you able to answer that, or Brian?
Thanks, Councillor Sutherland. My understanding is no, they haven't fed back. It was a requirement to just fulfil the contractual obligations for that 30,000 that we pass it to them, but then there's been no feedback thereafter. Nor did we ask for it though from them.
Through you, Chair Sharon. Yeah, and Councillor Alley's quite right in terms of when it was first developed, there was concern raised with the executive leadership team at the time, where it was first time we saw it, and we didn't feel it was at that point at the stage that it could be presented to council with the same concerns that were raised around the table here. But in saying that, we believe that needs to come here for direction in terms of where to go next with it, because it has been produced through external funding. So it was a requirement that it did come to council, hence that it's at council now. As a suggestion, depending on where you want to go with this, it can be received and then delegated to, I guess, to this committee to look at further work on it, whether or not that comes back as starting from scratch, or maybe some of the foundations of what would be in the strategy already in that document. But certainly from our perspective, there's a lot of work that is still required, but we needed to get it in front of you to get that direction going forward on whether or not you actually want the strategy at all, and where does it sit on our current priority list. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, through Chair Sharon, a straight question. As I understand it, you get 30K per annum for this. It says someone said a 30K freebie. So at the present point of time, every year, annually, you get 30K?
No.
Well, who said the 30K freebie? It was Salis and Councillor Franklin. I just want to clarify that, please.
One of the officers can probably clarify that. Thank you. Yeah.
That was what we received from Creative NZ to develop the strategy, one-off. And that
One-off.
contract's now finished.
So, yeah, I'm just trying to get the picture and join the dots. So what's going to happen? You get that 30K to develop this, and then we got to supply the money from somewhere to do what we've developed. Is that correct? Right. So it's going to be cost. Thank you.
Any further, Councillor Johns?
I'm inclined to take on board Brian's comment. It's probably low priority. It needs to be done, however. We'd be one of the few councils in the country without an art and history strategy. and it needs to be done. Quite what we do is, or when we do it, is moot.
Gilmore, and then I'm going to summarise, and councillor Long, but we'll go councillor Gilmore first.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I appreciate Brian's comments. I think that definitely could be a way forward. One thing I would say though is I think the priority is a little bit higher than being low for getting something into place, particularly for our museums. That the reason why I say that is we have a huge amount of history within our district spread across a number of museums through our towns. Volunteers in every organisation, and museums are no exception to that. We have an ageing volunteer base, and I think that we actually have to have a look as a council how we might be able to help coordinate and help support those organisations looking at our history. So what I would perhaps suggest is Councillor Johns has alluded to some discussions that museums are either have already had or are likely to have, but as a step to developing a strategy, even if it is for museums as a start, would be to invite them along to one of these committees to find out what they want, because I think a lot of this, like I mentioned before, the strategy does seem to be based off one person's opinion. Let's find out what our community members want that are actually going to be impacted by this strategy. So just, I guess, in closing Brian's comments, that we can receive the report and then refer it back to this committee, I'm totally okay with, but as it stands, I could not support any adoption of this as it is.
Through you, Sharon. This person was commissioned to do a job. It's not satisfactory and wasn't 14 months ago. I think it should have been given back to that person to with recommendation of where they could improve it.
I think if, given the time delay that we've had in this, I'm not sure. I had asked the question in my head about the implications against our contractual obligations with this. My understanding is the brief was given, the job was done, it was forwarded on to Creative Communities. That's that, and wherein lies that part of the process. Where we go from here, as per Brian's suggestion, would be for this committee to decide the direction and what does need to happen. So at this stage, I'm not sure, Councillor Long, we could actually start that without a direction coming from this committee to ensure that happens. I do want to close this off, Councillor Franken. Yeah.
Just to answer that question also, that the author of this left the district well over a year ago, so don't even know where she is now.
Thank you for that clarification. I previously haven't made any comment because I wanted to hear the will of the room. I only concur with a lot of the comments. There was no why in this for me. It was a wish list and very opinionated wish list. The comments that have been made already by my colleagues here just reflect the sense that I thought this is nothing like what a strategy should look like, and I think it's missed the mark big time. So to bring this to an end, we do have a recommendation. The way that it's written at the moment, we were to review and provide feedback on the draft version of the strategy. I think we have well and truly provided some feedback that I'm sure Ellie has captured. We have a proposed motion that Councillor Gilmore would like to perhaps summarise, which would reflect that we do the comments that were made. There is an importance to have an arts and culture strategy. This particular draft is fundamentally flawed, and the direction from this committee would need to reflect in the future greater consultation, an invitation to involve a lot more people in it. And so would you like to phrase the motion, councillor Gilmore, that you'd like, believe summarises that?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll probably change based off advice from the CE as to how we respond originally. I would have had that it's rejected. I think the first motion that it's received is fine. We definitely can receive it. And I just think that 1.2 is the elected members review and provide feedback. And then just to add to that line, and that it is referred back to this committee for further discussion. I think that captures the CE's recommendation. That way we can actually have a bit of a discussion about an art strategy in general.
Indicated direction and prioritise. You comfortable with that? So we got the motion on the table. Is it regarding the motion? Councillor Wallace.
Just because I heard the comment before, this is 30K was spent so far, and then it was put in the drawer. Can we have a time frame?
Well, if it comes back for further discussion, we'll have to be guided by the process through a workshop. Yeah. That's a suggestion.
Thank you.
So the first recommendation, do I have a mover and a seconder that it be received? Councillor Gilmore, Councillor Franklin. The second recommendation has been added to that elected members review, provide feedback on draft version, and it is referred back to the committee for further discussion and direction. Moved Councillor Gilmore, seconded Councillor Wallace. Get all that, Ellie? Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone, for that. Right. Second, next item on the agenda is our district strategy. Now, who's going to speak? You're going to speak to this, Adele? So, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Woods. Look, this strategy does predate me, and we like that. And we have really done some work to try and move it forward, and have looked back to incorporate all of the views of the community, where we did some extensive engagement to try and understand community views. Certainly take on board Mr. Rhodes' views earlier in the public forum, and can certainly consider those going forward. But I'd like everyone to, if we could work through that quite intimately, it would help us to get a steer so that we can move to finalise in the very near future. We've also worked closely with Councillor Wards and Johns on trying to bring some of this to fruition.
Thank you, Adele, for that context. So it hasn't been the first time that you've seen this, and there has been quite a bit of work gone into probably cutting it down and refining a lot of the words that have been placed before you prior. But I am with Adele. I think now is the time to go through not page by page. My particular focus is I want to make sure that we've nailed where the strategic objectives sit in those measures, and the feedback that Mr. Rose provided this morning was certainly focused on that. But I would like to get a general sense from people as we go around the room as to where you think this is sitting. Are we very close? And in particular, I think we'll spend some time looking at each of those focus areas and seeing whether or not some of those measures make sense. So who'd like to kick us off? Councillor Sutherland.
Thanks, Chair. My view is where we are now, it's very good. and it's been a lot of hard work and we need to get on with this, and I think it's good. I think it's really, really good actually, and I think that this, we'll have a discussion about a couple of areas, but my thoughts, and I take Tony's comments, take notice of Tony's comments, but I looked at that aspect as well as Tony, that aspect as well as Tony, but I thought it was covered very well in the purpose of this strategy, and the purpose which is included in there. I'll just, where am I? And because it was something I looked at too. Yeah, so in the purpose, we won't do the whole thing. It goes on to say that it encompasses, and it's a lot of the other strategies, and it goes on. And two of the important ones, which Tony touched on, was growth strategy, housing strategy, and spatial strategy. And I think this sits across over those and around those. And I think the specifics, the measurable specifics are contained in those strategies, I think. And I don't think we need this document to pull down any lower, because based around, I think we've got the stage now, we do have quite a good umbrella, and this is sitting up here. And I like the fact that we've got the housing, spatial and growth sitting underneath it. So, perhaps, and that to me, I felt okay with that. And I'm thinking that the document itself, I was pretty happy with it. 90%, because
Who'd like to go next? Because you're going to chip in here. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just more of clarification. Are you wanting us to go into substantive feedback, or is this the point of giving an overview of what we're looking for?
I think it's a good chance to, and that's why I did wish to focus in particular on the strategic objectives and the measures, because during the iterations of getting this plan there were possibly some things that, if they're not reflected there, then it's going to be hard further on to be able to set some measures around that. So I'm not going to go page by page, but I do think there is value in making sure we've got the strategic objectives and what it might look like in a visionary way. So just want to get a sense from everyone, and then we'll start digging, if you're comfortable with that.
Thanks for that. There are a couple of very, very minor sort of typographical things, but I think I'll just email those through if we're not going to be literally adopting. I agree with Councillor Sutherland's comments as an overview. We've seen a couple of iterations of this come through, and I was really impressed with how this has come up, of actually having a look, seeing what the vision is and what some things that I guess how we're going to measure whether we've achieved some of those things. It's shortened down quite considerably. I know recently I haven't had a great track record with strategies coming across the council table, but this is one that with some minor modifications, I think that we can be proud of as a council. So I just wanted to, I guess, acknowledge the work, Madam Chair, that you've done and the Deputy Chair's done on bringing this strategy through. Just a couple of comments. Were very, very interesting to note that one of the voices of the community slides discusses the needs for an art strategy. So I just wanted to, I guess, highlight that in there. One thing I just wanted to mention on those pictures, I know that's not getting into, the nitty gritty, is I do think we have to have some caution in there, because if they're being published as one person's viewpoint, they're not quantified. We don't know how much support those comments have. So if we're going through and adopting it, we need to make sure that we don't have any sort of controversial type comments within there. So just something to think about. One part I wanted to mention, and it is kind of jumping straight down to the back, the only bit that really jumped out at me that I think needs some amendment is on page 75. So looking at the interactive council objectives there, And it's really in the measures for the first one. So the strategic objective was to have effective partnerships with iwi, which I think that as a council, we are working very, very hard to be able to achieve. The first bullet point, though, is active iwi membership on council committees. Really wanted to raise that because at this point, council's made no decision as to whether we are going to be doing that. And I think that needs to have a much wider conversation. But also, I think if it is in this document, you know, I'm definitely a believer that if we've written it down, it's something that we should try and achieve. I think we need to make sure that council is all on board with that. And we don't want to set up unrealistic expectations for our iwi partners of seeing it in that document and then expecting it. I don't think that's necessarily fair. So my suggestion for that is just amending that wording of working with iwi, which is what we are doing.
Thank you, Councillor Gilmore.
I just want to get a sense from everyone else. Councillor Wallace?
Yeah, and I will say, I do not like the graphic on page 72. Because that, if you look at it, that actually depicts an Aryan race. But if you know your history, you know what that salute is. And if you know about Aryan races, that's why you can't go cap in hand, because nothing will stay in it.
From the mural.
I know it's from the mural, but the way it's presented there, you can look at it and yeah, I don't like that.
Can you, some of this level of detail, if that gets emailed to Adele, it can be included in any. What about the overall document itself, Councillor Wallace?
I agree with Councillor Kerry with where we're going. There's been some good work done on that, and I also agree with Tony from the public arena there. Yeah, but I think generally we are heading in the right direction. Thank you.
Already spoken, and I understand where Tony Rose is coming from. But it also states in our strategy that there are all these underlying other strategies that support this, which is the financial infrastructure growth, district spatial plan, climate change strategy, and housing, which would help answer a lot of the measurements that we have already considered in our plan. But overall, I think we are on the right track. There are a few amendments, and yeah, the layout of it needs some work as well on this. Yeah. Councillor Peter Luber.
Sharon. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. It's got a good overview of what our goals are and where we're looking towards in the future. Yeah, there's a few typos in there I just want to question, but I'll send them through. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Sharon. No, I actually agree with everything that's been said as well. I don't altogether agree with the comment about the mural, but that's personal opinion. And I was going to mention the typos too, so I think we'll let Scott do that. But otherwise, we've come a long way, I think, from when we first started this document. And we've certainly crafted the wording of it a lot better than what it was originally. It's a lot easier to read, and it makes me actually very proud to be a part of this district. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. Yeah, similarly, I concur with Kerry's and all the comments made. I think it's as an overarching document, I think it's very good. And to go back, Tony, to one of your comments, we were asked at the start to consider the district in 50 years. Not the next 5 years or 10 years, a 50-year picture, and things like increased agricultural production or diversification in land use. That's taking into consideration climate change and the very real possibility that the Tararua district could end up in orchards and cropping to a much greater degree than has ever occurred in the past, whereas the Wairarapa and Central Hawke's Bay become extremely arid. So it's a general comment about how we picture the district in 30 to 50 years' time. And as Brian mentioned, the specifics are in the likes of long-term plans and other strategies like growth strategy and housing strategies. To dig deep into those or to include those sorts of strategies in this overarching document would end up with a very, very heavy document. But I think it's where we want to go, and it's leave it at that.
Thank you, Chair. I struggle with the document. I think we could do with lessening it, breaking it down lower. We're a small council and with a small rate base, and we need to concentrate on our core business. And some of this here, I'm not convinced that we should be going near it. Some of these things are irrelevant to this council. Thank you.
Perhaps when we start digging into the strategic objectives or the measures, you might be able to give us some examples there, Councillor Long. So we've got a sense from everyone as to pretty much going in the right direction. There's obviously some changes or iterations being suggested, but I think, Adele, you'd be really keen if we did actually just have a wee bit of a dig around, in particular the pages that reflect the focus areas, and have we nailed what those strategic objectives might be. So on page 64 and page 65, sorry, Councillor. So we're looking at the thriving district. It's probably page 17 of the document then, is it? I got that. 16, 17. Yeah. So under thriving district, we have 5 strategic objectives there. Public forum, Mr. Rhodes reflected on was this responsibility of council and mention of the housing strategy. Those measures, is there anything missing that councillors may have a view on? So we're looking at thriving district as the first focus area. You've all got it on that. You, Councillor Johns?
I can just comment on that for you. The first one there, to capitalise on the opportunities such as the new Te Ahua-Turanga Highway, that brings with it business development opportunities without being specific about anything. New industry to the district, new types of business and so on. That's what that means in part. And greater population. And once again, this is an overarching document, not a specific thing.
And a good example of that might be the bullet point, more people living in our district. Well, that has implications around our housing strategy and how we might go about that, just keeping it up at that higher level. So those strategic objectives, we didn't just sit there and make them up. This has come through, all of the iterations to date. So is everyone comfortable? Is there anything in there, Councillor Long, that you're concerned that because we are a small council, we shouldn't be dabbling in?
Agriculture.
So the last bullet point.
Disappointing, you put decreased pollution in rivers and streams.
Do you want to put
Sorry about that. Increased agriculture production, just below that you put decreased pollution in the rivers and streams. This council isn't, if it's agriculture, we're not responsible for that. We're responsible, as the general public has just said, Tony, just with our wastewater and solid waste. And that, if you're going to do that, to have a thriving environment, responsive, and leave the sustainable farming out of it.
Your suggestion is to take farming, the word farming out of it?
And agriculture.
Yeah, it is under the strategic objective. Any other views on that one? Councillor Gilmore?
Thank you, Chair Sharon. I actually definitely do agree with the second bullet point in that area, where that being a Horizons responsibility. I wouldn't take agriculture out of the strategic document, though, just knowing that that makes up such a huge part of our population and ratepayer base. Are really important businesses to our areas. So I think having thriving, environmentally responsible and sustainable farming is a great objective to have. But yeah, I think we can be just careful that we aren't overlapping with the measures, that we are measuring something that another council was responsible for. So I think that that's probably a fair comment.
Chair Sharon. Yeah, the farming or land use needs to be in there because it is the guts of our district. And the classic example is forestry. We will have a say in what happens in forestry in the district, where those forests will be and to what extent they're managed, etc., etc. So it's not as if it's nothing to do with us. It's got a lot to do with us, or will have a lot to do with us. And I don't see any reason for not having it there.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Sharon. This is the intention of this strategy, is to be the council's strategy for their aspirations across the district, for which we provide the local authority for. And I think within that, does need to be high level, but everything that is within this district, the land, the people, the waterways, is all something that we've got a responsibility to kaitiaki, to be the caretaker of. Whether our role is actually physically doing some of those things or advocating for the better use of, for those people that have influences within our district, that I think that that's what we're trying to highlight here. And I do think that clean drinking water, because everything leaches into our waterways, which then does get people, our people drink. So we do have a responsibility. That's what we're trying to highlight here. We believe that we will be thriving as a district when we're economically thriving, plus we're also mitigating the adverse impacts on our environment, be it through advocacy or through sustainable change. I just wanted to point that out. Brian, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, just that we're also going to
Yeah.
So it's some sort of thing that we're responsible.
Yeah.
And look at all the farming issues we've had around our waterways as well in terms of what's happening there. So that I think we cover that on to what goes.
Any other comments on this particular focus area? Councillor Sutherland.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. I think my view of this, I think the strategic objectives across the policy is good. I mean, in the summary of this document, it said it's a living document where we continue to engage with the community, and it's not set in concrete this at the moment. I think the areas that could change, we could argue about measures for a long time in here, and the measures may be the thing that we could get bound up in. And I think the measures will change, that we may decide that they're not quite what we need to, how to measure it. And this area of sustainable farming could be that, but not only in that particular objective, I think that the measures might change. I think we could get bogged up with this.
Yeah.
I really, as we go through the long-term plan and thinking about some of these issues, we might find we need to specifically be X, Y, Z. And some measures might change after this weekend with a change of government. It will be, but some of those measures we might plonk something here. But I think the strategic objectives, I think the measures are areas that we might tweak. You know, and that's my thoughts.
Valid comment. Thank you, Councillor Sutherland. So with that in mind, can we move to improving our environment, which is the next focus area? Let's just check in around the strategic objectives. Anything stand out that we're missing? In public forum, Mr. Rhodes reflected on our greenhouse emissions, on the fact that waste management and recycling weren't in there, and no comment about our sustainable water management. Does anyone have a view, any other views around what's in there? A lot of sighing going on, but so in the absence of any comment, then that's good to go. Was everyone catching up with me? What about moving to connected communities then? So we've got 3 strategic objectives there. Basically outstanding facilities, design of our towns, and resilience and reliable infrastructure. I'm a looking, and no one's. Not even going to buy into that. I'm not allowed to look at public forum anymore. Councillor Frank.
I'd just like to note that good roads and digital capability exists throughout the district. I think Phil Grant would be very gratified to see that in our strategy.
So we think we've probably nailed that. We're getting leaner and meaner. You would have seen that Adele and Councillor Johns and I are getting a bit tired towards the end. So the last focus area then is the interactive council. And Councillor Gilmore's already made a comment around, and perhaps the phrasing could perhaps change to us finding more inclusive ways of involving iwi in council discussions or something like that.
Am I able to ask a question, clarification?
Ellie's saying no, Mr. Rhodes. Email us. So there's 4 bullet points there. Anything missing or?
Are we doing that top measure about iwi membership on council committees? I mean, council committees are a specific thing, aren't they? It's not like workshops. And I think Councillor Gilmore's comments about how that's phrased needs to be taken into account.
Yeah, so that's what I've suggested, is that we change that to find more inclusive ways to involve iwi and council. Yeah. Anything else in there? And there is missing. So there's actually been some quite valid discussion that would need to be included in a review. The recommendation has been that we do exactly what we've done. So that 1.1, the recommendation was that we receive the district strategy. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Sutton.
Let's have one small comment before we go. One thing I did take on Tony's comments about waste, which is significant, and it's not in the strategy, but it also wasn't in the purposes. So I wonder whether it shouldn't be added as a particular strategy, as the waste minimisation strategy, whether that should be added into the purpose as under growth and housing and. That will have some KPIs and things in it that we've just approved the draft.
Purpose?
So I wonder, because we just adopted that last Wednesday, didn't we, the draft? So And that's got some and there's some statutory requirements we've got to meet by 2030, which will apply to this. So
I'll add that to the list then, councillor Sutherland, in the preface. Okay, so the recommendation is that we receive it. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Sutherland, councillor Franklin. All those in favour? And the second recommendation is that we adopt it, including final amendments as agreed by the committee. Now, I'll check with Ellie, we can actually adopt this strategy. It doesn't need to go to council. But how might we have the approval of final amendments as agreed? Could that come back to this committee, in the November committee? So the recommendation is that we adopt, but we include any final amendments as agreed by us at the November meeting. Councillor Gilmore, wish to speak to that motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we shouldn't adopt if we do have changes that we need to make. I think there's been a fair bit of feedback that has been given, although relatively minor in nature. My view is that feedback should be incorporated and we should have a final document that we come through. That should be a very clear process because we've already had the discussion, but I think that is better process in my opinion.
So comfortable with we put this on into the well, what wording would you do?
You brought back to the November meeting.
If you're actually like specify the final amendments in the resolution, then it could be adopted, just with a list of what tweaks you've agreed to make to it. Otherwise, you'd want to you've received it. You'd say, note the amendments will be included in the draft and provided to the November meeting for final adoption.
Happy with that? I'll second it. You wish to speak to the motion, Brian?
Is that okay? I'm just going to suggest that could go to a council meeting, which is sooner than the strategy policy. It's just going to have the
People comfortable with that then?
Happy to change the motion to that and still move it.
If you've got time, Bill.
What would you prefer?
That's fine, you've got time to update it.
Good, yeah, well, let's speak to this Adele, because yeah.
Providing the comments come back in, like the typos that have been made, and councillor Chase, you made some comments around the format, how the layout, that I'd need that to be quite specific, then yes, I think we can turn it around in time for the council meeting, which is like in 2 weeks.
Lost your days through later weekends. So.
Well, it comes back to this committee. So if the amendment can be made to the recommendation that formal adoption will take place at the next committee meeting based on feedback received today from everyone. Comfortable with that? So did we get that moved and seconded? Excellent. Great input today, though. Thank you very much, everyone, for that one. I'm going to ask that we break. I know. Well, Amy will talk about when Dan might be appropriate to dial in. So after morning tea, we'll move into the environment scan with you, Malcolm, and then we'll go to the management report. So it might be after 11 before we need Dan. Is that okay? Are you able to let him know, Amy? No. Okay. Right. Thanks, everyone. We'll come back here at 5 to 11, please.
You're right there, councillor Franklin.
Yes.
And
I'm just sitting in any time.
right. Can you perhaps pull that door, Brian? Thank you.
Right, welcome back, everyone. Suitably refreshed and ready to go again. Right, thank you, Malcolm. I'll call you to the table to take us through the environment scan, item 7.3. I've asked Malcolm to reflect briefly on the contents of what he circulated to us, but I know he's got some pretty fresh updates. It's a moving feast, isn't it, Malcolm? So we're in your hands. I've indicated to Amy that we may well move into bringing Dan online about 15:15 with a brief update from Angela prior to the end, if that's. Malcolm, thank you.
Thank you, councillors, Chair. Yeah, as you're of course aware, there's a lot of a moving feast at the moment in terms of all sorts of things going on, and it's more probable, likely change in government. You read and which day it is. So a couple of things. To start off, I'll just kick you off on a couple of important changes that impact the district quite a lot, particularly around forestry, and then I'll just summarise the key points of the scan. There's quite a lot changed since the last one we looked at, and then if time, just a couple of minutes on sort of the biggest impacts in council from the possible change in government in terms of the stated policies anyway. I mean, we'll find out in the next few months as the horse training goes on. But yeah, so in the last few weeks, there's been a significant change in regulations that impact on forestry, and this will have quite a big impact on land use in our district. And the upshot of it is that it's likely to curtail any forestry investment in the short term anyway, at least. And before I just briefly summarise what the changes have been, the Foresters Association kicked off a judicial review against the government this morning, challenging the government's new regulations. So these things don't tend to be that quickly resolved. But anyway, they're responding as much as they can because of the impacts of it. So there's a couple of things that have come in place. It's been going on most of the year, which is a review of the National Environmental Standard for production forestry. That's the National Environmental Standard that overrides your local district plan in terms of the rules that govern plantation forestry. They didn't apply to carbon forests. And that's things like setbacks from the boundary, the way you deal with around waterways, and a whole raft of other things in terms of how you cut, how you do it, whatever. So they announced a couple of weeks, or very recently, that this is now going to be called a National Environmental Standard commercial forestry. They've brought carbon forestry into the rules. So carbon forests will have to comply with all of the regulations around how you plant it, where you plant it, setbacks around streams and all that. So it's quite a major thing in terms of how that'll work. So it's particularly around protection of waterways and so forth. In that is also an inclusion of more power for local government to include rules in the district plan around where forests can be planted. And so that's been sort of talked about all year. They've actually done it. So you'll be able to have, council will be able to have rules in the plans controlling where new commercial forests, that's carbon and production, where they're located, and some other rules as well that can even can sort of add to the national environmental standards. So, I mean, that's quite a big thing if council decides to get into it, but of course, you know, doing that has costs. And some of these forestry companies have got very deep pockets. And so it's not something that you would decide to do lightly. And it will, you know, but you are in the, you know, in part of a district plan review at the moment. So it's just yet another thing to think about. The other thing they brought in was some pretty draconian rules about how forestry is managed when it's harvested. And so the new requirements say that all slash has to be removed. That's anything that is wider than with a width of 10 centimeters at one end, longer than 2 meters. So that's pretty much everything. That's substantial. Now, the problem with that for foresters, this is why they've taken a judicial review, is that means that it's now uneconomic to harvest forests. I mean, the cost of picking up slash and trucking it away per tonne is more than what you get from a tonne of trees cut down. And where are you going to take it? Where's it going? To a landfill? They're claiming it's a knee-jerk reaction to the cyclone and all that sort of stuff, which is probably not untrue. But anyway, so there's it's quite draconian. Yeah, so but the little thing in it is that where foresters are unable to meet the standards, they require a resource consent from council. So it's putting it a bit back on local government at the same time. Which also means that council would need some expertise as to how to deal with an application.
Are you happy to take comments and questions?
Through you, Chair. Would that be regional council or district council that would adhere to that?
Didn't say. Is it territorial? Isn't it territorial?
Yeah, I think it's local. Sorry, if it was water, it would be regional. If it's to do with the stream, it'd be regional, I think.
Yeah, we have rules for both.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just something else to add to Amy's workload. This is assuming it's still there in a few months. Okay, the other thing that they brought in, which is through a different regulation, is that they've imposed new fees for all forests that are in the emission trading scheme. And it's a blanket fee of $30.25 per hectare. So this is imposed annually for all forests that are in the emissions trading scheme. And it goes towards funding the entire operation costs of the ETS. So that includes council's forest, Birch Road. I mean, anything that's got carbon credits would have to imply that. There's also new fees for 22 other existing and new services, which they didn't list. It's just, yeah, so there's a whole lot of costs coming on forestry is what I'm saying. We don't need to go over any more detail of that. It's just, but basically the impact will be in the short term anyway. It's unlikely that there's going to be too many farm conversions to forestry. Because at the meantime, the whole emission trading scheme is still under review, as well as.
Chase. Can I ask who those fees are going to be paid to?
The Ministry for Environment or MPI, MPI. A government department.
Not us.
No.
Well, that burst the bubble this morning, didn't it?
Okay, but I mean, there's pluses and minuses for council in terms of where you've been going on the stuff. The other a couple of major things, Fonterra lifted its payout forecast by 75 cents a kilo yesterday, day before, up to a midpoint of 7.25. And the futures market's looking higher than that. So there's been a reasonable recovery in the world price of dairy products. So pointing towards better better prices in the next year. Still going to be quite a tough year this season. Round about break even or slightly under. Yeah, okay. So that was just a couple of things that stood out that were pretty significant for the district. A whole lot of other little changes that don't really move the dial. So in terms of the actual scan, we've got a couple of key overriding trends and issues that are going on. Overall, there's a slowing economic activity. Property market has sort of bottomed out on this cycle at the moment. It's been saved by an influx of people from overseas. That's my basically view. There's been a massive increase in population in New Zealand in the last year, which has underpinned the property market. Things have now stabilised, and you've got a whole sector which is trying to talk up the market. But so times are reasonably tough out there for a lot of people. The big thing is interest rates and debt. So debt is significantly increased in the last few years, both New Zealand, a lot of councils, and internationally. There is a titanic amount of debt around the world. The US Treasury market is today 5 times bigger than it was 2008, and interest rates, we're talking 25 trillion US. Interest rates in the last year and a half, 2 years gone from 1 or 2% up to 5%. If you do the numbers on how much interest cost that is, these are very, very big numbers. This is going to have some massive impacts on a whole lot of things. New Zealand's not immune to this. This basically drives our interest rates to a large extent, at least as much as the Reserve Bank, because the banks get their wholesale funding not just from New Zealand, but internationally. So they tend to follow that. So the big take-home point is that interest rates are higher for much longer. The Reserve Bank New Zealand is now saying they don't expect interest rates to come down at all until 2025. And this has a big impact on the cost of council funding CapEx and the stuff you've already done and the stuff you plan to do. And so, it has a big impact. The only thing council can do going forward from now is to reduce the amount of CapEx that you do, which doesn't help for the stuff that you've already done in terms of the debt. So those costs flow through. Not much you can do about it. So there's quite a lot of risks in terms of all sorts of asset prices and so forth. So debt and interest rates, quite big. Second biggest issue, I think, is climate change. I put in this scan a few charts and a few things that are going on. Our good friend Peter is talking tipping points from all the stats that he monitors. And obviously we've seen some pretty big climatic impacts this year. The general feeling in the experts is that we're going to see that a lot more frequently. Shouldn't be a surprise, but yeah, there's some quite big changes coming our way. In past LTPs, it was always like in the future. This LTP, it's in it, basically. And so there's a lot of pressure on council to show investment and budgets that look at resilience and adaptation. Fortunately, in another big result for council, positively, was the FAR rate from Wakakatuhu, the NZTA, going from 69% to 73%. That's a big plus for council. Certainly is going to help a lot. I would point out though that the increase in funding, because there's been sort of no reductions around the country as such, and some councils increased. The funding for local roads from NZTA, a lot of that budget across New Zealand is being supplemented with debt. That's how they're funding it. If you're expecting to have a lot more events and damaging climatic events and so forth, there's a point where that can't continue. The last two work program periods have quite significant chunks of debt from New Zealand wide to fund these things. There's a point where you can't keep doing that, and then there's how they're going to fund the pie, which is not a decision that this council has to face, but will be something that will impact on it going in the years to come. That's a central government issue. So anyway, that's quite a big thing. We've seen costs increases come down, still increasing, but coming back down to more normal levels. Interestingly, particularly in agriculture, farm price increases have reduced significantly. The last 6 months is only going up at about a 3% annual rate. So after massive cost increases the last few years, things have come right back, and in terms of the increases, haven't dropped. But and underpinning that, there's quite a bit of the world commodity prices have fallen quite a lot. So like world commodity prices are 11% lower than a year ago. World food prices are actually quite a lot lower. These are changes, these are at the wholesale level. For some reason, that doesn't seem to come through to our supermarkets. But a lot of the basic food commodities, their prices have actually fallen quite a lot in the last year, but actually reduced. Right. Yeah, just about getting there. We're still seeing a big shortage of rental housing. The number of new houses coming through in the last few months has reduced quite a lot, falling back from the higher levels of last year. And new rules around, new data really around floodplains and information around where flooding and the more intense rainfall hits means that it's going to be harder to find land that you can build on easily. So there's the whole change in people struggling in the economy, retail trade suffering a bit, and at the same time the whole move to online is still trucking along. The result is there's more and more empty shops. It's particularly in the bigger cities, more and more empty commercial buildings, like office space, because people working from home as well. But yeah, generally looking to the future, there's less of a need for the amount of commercial property that is currently in place in the towns. Okay, and the biggest things I think that are likely from a change in government. The first one is Three Waters. It looks pretty uncertain to me as to what's going to happen if we get a right of centre coalition. They do have stated policies. I noticed they haven't updated it since earlier this year. They're still talking about rescinding Three Waters legislation immediately, basically. However, in response to Auckland City Council saying yesterday that the rates for water would double in 3 years if they didn't actually do anything else, Luxon said that he didn't agree with that at all. and prices wouldn't go up and things will be fixed. Now, I'm not quite sure how that's possible. Given if you leave the regulator in place and the new water standards in place. So I think there's still quite a bit of things to happen on this with a new government, but what is certain is that the ownership structure will stay in council in some form. But I think the pressure will be on in the first year or so, the next couple of years, for councils to work out how they're going to collaborate together to be able to deliver the standards that are required. And so there's probably a process. There's not much point. There'll be a lot of work needed to be done. You might have, there's work already going on at the regional level. But this is quite a big thing.
So I attended a meeting last week around with the other regional CEs regarding Three Waters, where and DIA was president of that. So currently DIA haven't received any post-election instructions should it be a national government. So they're pretty much sitting in limbo as well. What we do know under the national is that effectively it will be up to the regions to sort out. And what will those regions will once again be up to the councils to sort out. So we are going back, we're picking quite a way, probably, back 18 months potentially in terms of starting the process again. First 100 days legislation be repealed. But from I guess from a regional C perspective, current model doesn't work. We do need to look at what will be a better model, and obviously the C4LD model that the national is highly likely to pick up a part of that. So how that will work around debt, handover debt ceilings, etc., is still yet to be determined. But under a national government, Malcolm's absolutely right. Ownership will remain with councils, but it's about how do we get that balance sheet separation to ensure that we can raise further debt. The national government has also talked around city and regional deals. Certainly, really, you might be touching on this maybe, but regional deals could be another way where there is co-investment in infrastructure. But none of that has been committed at this point, but those are sort of the options. So from a regional CE point of view, we are looking at what those regional deals could look like. We know that Palmerston North City Council has already submitted a city deal to national government. What in terms of that, and what we're trying to push for is inclusion for the other councils as well as part of a regional, because what we have heard from the national government is that they will prefer regional deals.
All right, so I think the council next year will be doing quite a bit of work in the space, and obviously might become an LTP. We always said this year that you might have to pivot as part of the LTP in terms of some of the stuff, because depending on what your views are, council retaining ownership in Three Waters in some form comes with a whole lot of baggage in terms of trying to comply with the requirements. And the water regulator is certainly flexing its new muscles at the moment. Yeah. So anyway, that's that one. It's also, there's a couple of other things, I think, particularly for farmers, there's a whole push to make water storage easier and more easy to get consents for. They're still following the same path as the current government in terms of amending the emissions trading scheme, in terms of limiting it to land use classes that, not putting forests on good land. There's stuff that's still likely to happen. They are still saying that they're going to repeal the new Natural and Built Environments Act and replace it with, don't know what, but the RMA would come back into power. And then they'd immediately start work in terms of replacing the RMA again. So the whole work program would start again. There's, look, the stuff that doesn't apply to Tararua a bit, but they're going to put more pressure on councils to deliver more housing land. Their stated policy focuses on the bigger towns and cities. But some of that will probably flow through. That's in terms of having land zoned and ready for housing. And they're talking about $1 billion fund that would help, that would provide an incentive payment for councils that have house building at above average levels, funded by slashing Kāinga Ora's budget. But it does not apply to towns of our size.
Just can Councillor Gilmore ask a quick question?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just really quickly, my understanding of the National Party policy was in any area that were building houses over their 5-year average, 25,000 per consented property would be paid to councils for infrastructure. I think part of that $1 billion plan, from what I've read, it didn't seem to limit it to town sizes, but just want some clarification.
It did say, from what I read, that it was tier 1 and 2 councils. It was tier 3. So, I mean, whether that detail is right or not, I mean, that's the direction anyway.
This could be a huge opportunity for us if we could get it.
Yeah. And a whole bunch of other changes that will impact on things like politics and the health sector and all that sort of stuff, which is all probably not worth going into at the moment. Yeah.
How long could be in October?
They are promising to end the effective ban on GE and GM technology, which will eventually be quite big news for agriculture. But I don't know, they didn't seem to have much of a view on immigration. I should point out that in the last 12 months, there's been a net increase in New Zealand population from immigration of 2%. It's a record-breaking number of people coming in. There's 60-odd thousand New Zealanders have left in the last year, but 26,000 New Zealanders have come home. Both these numbers are near record levels. And there's about 190,000 foreigners, non-New Zealand citizens have arrived permanently. So while there's an awful lot of people leaving, there's a much bigger number of other people that think New Zealand's even is worth coming to. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? So it's having a big impact, a really big impact. Seems some sort of one extreme to the other at the moment. And what that impact is having in Tararua, it's really hard to tell. There's a smallish number of people that say they're going to Tararua when they arrive. It's quite, it's more than we normally have historically, but it's still a relatively small number. The number of people leaving, I can't tell you. That number's not available until about 1.5 years after. There's a big lag in the departure numbers because they don't actually track intentions anymore. They actually just monitor passports.
Anything else, Malcolm? I'm just mindful of that.
No, happy to take questions.
Any questions? Quick questions to Malcolm?
As always, I see huge value in these, the work that you put into this, Malcolm, and I've been writing frantically the executive summary of those pages because the insights that you were able to offer are extremely important to all of us. Any quick questions before we move on then? Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, I just seen your scan through you, Sharon, on page 24 there, that net migration figures. See, it just definitely shows how much of a backdoor we are. 46,900 didn't start around, they come in and took off. So then we ended up with 135,600 of the 182,500, which is 316%. So this is 2022. Is that right?
It's the 12 months to July.
Right.
So it's pretty up to date. You remember that the people arriving and leaving permanently include students. So there is a natural, if you get a massive inflow of foreign students 3 years ago or 4 years ago, then there is a big outflow, 3 or 4 years later, just as a natural thing, depending on how many stay. But there's always people coming and going. But yeah, no, they're big numbers at the moment, really big numbers.
Right. Thank you for your time and effort that goes into that, Malcolm. We'll move on to, I'm just going to do a bit of rejiggling of our agenda. So I've checked with the commission. Oh, sorry. Can we have a mover, please, for the recommendation that we accept? Paper, Councillor Wallace, Councillor Chase. Thank you. Right. I'm just going to jiggle the agenda. I've checked with Adele. Angela, will you be comfortable if we move to your item after the management update? We now have online with us Dan. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're trying to balance other priorities at the moment. So thank you very much for joining us, Daniel. And I've asked, and he's already moved up, so we're all good to go. Where are you, Dan?
At a marae in Palmerston North at the moment. So just a parent helper. My daughter gave me strict instructions that I was to attend the school visit. So that's me today. So I'm juggling.
How long are you able to be with us, Dan? We can.
I'm fine at the moment. It's a good little period, so don't stress about that. Amy's going to take a lead, and I'll be here for any questions.
Right. Well, given the item 7.5 that's been prepared by you, Adele, how would you like to steer this paper, please?
Happy to move straight to you, Dan, yourself and Amy, and then we'll pick up again with the LTP in.
So Dan, looking forward to an update from you and Amy regarding our growth strategy and progress that's being made. Thank you. You thinking?
John, are you okay?
Sorry. I was waiting if I'm talking or if Amy was going to talk.
Well, I can update. So effectively, we've had to pause in terms of our deliverables for the growth strategy, for our draft growth strategy. And the reason that we are doing that is to get some pretty important information in terms of flood modelling for Pahiatua, which is coming along nicely. We've engaged, we've worked with Pete Wimsett and DHI with Greg White, and we've engaged him to run Model 3 scenarios based on the updated LiDAR information for Pahiatua. And we're expecting that to be delivered by the end of this month, so that 27th of October may be up by a couple of days. So it's 3 scenarios that are identified. One is for a 1 in 100 year event with an RCP of 8.5. So the RCP is a worst climate scenario for high emissions. So that was that's been recommended by, through Pete, but also all the other councils are doing it to this RCP 8.5. So we're not alone in doing it to this standard. But this information will inform where our growth should go or where it can't go. So it would be really remiss of us to go ahead with a growth strategy and say we're going here, and then our flood modelling comes in a month later and we go, actually, we're not going there. So we didn't want to look silly.
The other one is a RCP 8.5 again for a 200-year event, and we've also factored in a shock event, which is described as a 500-year RCP 8.5 Chicago storm, which is like a 12-hour duration, high-intensity rainfall. So this information will inform Pāhia Tour. We'll get this at the end of this month. It is a little bit trickier with our situation for Woodville. What we found out through the Horizons information that we have through with their flood modelling, it was actually, there's a lot of variability within it. It hasn't been rationalised or calibrated in terms of the WSP model that was done through Te Ahua Tūranga and extended with Horizons. So the 1 and 200-year events, there's actually a large amount of variability between those, the data that we have. In excess of up to 700 millimetres. So we can't rely on that information. So that's the challenge for us at the moment. We have discussed it with DHI. DHI could run the model again, but it was effectively going to be, you know, we get to the same scenario. We wouldn't be able to rationalise the information because Horizons doesn't hold information, historical flood information for Woodville, which seems ironic, but they don't. So we can't run it against a historical flood event to see whether or not the model is sensible, effectively. So we looked at DHI rerunning the model, but they'd come to the same problem. So we've gone back to WSP and we've said, okay, well, how about if we've got this updated LiDAR information? Pete Wimsett has also been in discussions with Horizons, and there's a landowner on as part of Te Ahua Tūranga where they have been recording flood information for, well, rainfall information for the last 2 years. So potentially they could use that to rationalise the model. But we're still working with that, working that through with WSP, and we're looking at potentially looking at where we may look at providing a industrial growth direction, I guess. We're looking to potentially target an area within Woodville where we may do some specific modelling to help us with that assessment. So for Pāhia Tour, it's quite simple, well, relatively simple. We're getting that information. That information will be fed to us by the end of October. With the Woodville scenario, it's not straightforward. We're still working through it. Pete's away this week. I'll catch up with him next week and we will update you as soon as we can. In terms of our industrial land, which is the next point, and our growth projections, we realised as we were doing the growth strategy that we actually had no data on industrial growth and commercial growth projections for the district. So it was really important that that we got this data to help inform our growth strategy. So we engaged Burl, and they've provided commercial and industrial growth projections for our district, which is fantastic. We received that on the 25th of September. It is, the scenarios is based on, they've run the modelling based on, you know, growth projections for population and the against the scenarios. But what we've since met with them and we said, actually, can you run this from an aspirational perspective? Because we have taken on board what the council is, the direction you guys are wanting to take, and that you want to have growth, and especially within the commercial and industrial area for Woodville. So where they're going back and they're running the model with an aspirational focus. So we'll have two sets of data, one based on actual numbers and one based on our aspiration that we can then feed into the growth strategy.
It's due on the 3rd of November.
So running alongside this, we are still going through the growth strategy. We're still, Shannon is working and Dan on drafting it. And we are revising it. So we meet weekly and we're doing like a rolling revision, I'll describe it as. So we're feeding in all the time so that when this information comes in, we will be able to quickly turn it around and get to the point where we're at a draft to submit to you guys.
A question for you, Amy and or Daniel. When we reviewed the minutes this morning, prior to you joining us, there was an action there that we were to ensure that interested members of the community would be contacted. Now, there had been an assurance that meetings with Phil Grant and Tony Rhodes were going to be taking place. Can we have an update on that and or an assurance as if you're meeting weekly that the contact will be made?
Yes, we do meet weekly. I understand that Phil Grant has been contacted and met with. So if Tony Rhodes hasn't been met with, I'll make a note of it now and make sure that we raise it at the next Monday meeting and organise that. Yep, sorry.
The big approach at the moment is we're just trying to get a refined piece of technical work that we can produce to the public. And then it will go out into the public arena in draft form for about a month. And certainly once we have that concrete sort of talking point, I suppose, then we can sit down with those interested parties and actually present them where we've got to with things and absorb that information through that month-long period and adapt and make amendments as required. So I guess just to reiterate sort of around Amy, the big thing I want council to remember is that the growth strategy is inherently linked with the district plan review. So we really need to make sure this growth strategy is laying a solid platform for the district plan review to build off after that. So that's why we're making sure that our flooding information is accurate and our projection work is accurate to make. So when I come through the district plan process, there's that platform there. So echo what Amy said, we're really taking on board that the growth strategy is essentially going to play two roles. It's going to build on the factual picture, but it's also going to capture the aspiration of council as well. So we're really trying to position it in that sense. And these extra bits of information will help refine that picture. And then, as I say, once we get to that final draft, we'll sit down with council, work through it to a point where you guys are happy with where we've got to, and then we'll go and have those conversations with the public, because there's no use us talking to the public too far ahead of time if council around the table is not comfortable with where we've got to. So it's sort of a staged approach, and unfortunately just, we're only as good as the information in front of us. And yeah, we're just trying to close those pictures off first before we start talking to people out there in the wide world, because we don't sort of want to set expectations ahead of time, if that makes sense.
Any questions for Amy or Daniel? You look like you need to be somewhere else, Daniel, so.
No, I'm fine. I'm all good. I was moving away from the noise because so there's no interference. I'm all good. Don't worry.
Any questions from any of the councillors? So, I mean, you've pretty much indicated there's a bit of a pause going on at the moment, that we have some challenges in a certain area.
I will reiterate, the district plan work is not held up, so I'm still pushing ahead with that. So at this point, the delay in the growth strategy is not impacting the district plan work. It's a case similar to where the draft of the growth strategy is when that information comes through, then I can just incorporate it. But yeah, just want to make sure that council's aware that, it's not a flow-on effect at this stage.
So given the timing of our next strategy meeting, Daniel, some of these dots might have been closed off, so we might be in a better position to actually look at some data in the next update next month. Would that be correct?
Yeah. We're pushing our experts, so the flooding guys and Burl in the projection space pretty hard in terms of timeframes, because we are conscious we want to keep this thing moving. The awkwardness that we are going to approach it, as everyone is no doubt aware, as Christmas is fast approaching, and public consultation in and around that period is going to become tricky. So it might be a point of we have a draft growth strategy, we have all the ducks in a row come the start of December, but then we might have to be delayed a little bit for that public phase, because it's a little bit tricky to engage with people that close to the holidays. But certainly we will feed things through as quickly and as fast as we can. Just in regards to the flooding stuff, in terms of Woodville, it is more in the industrial space. We're very comfortable with the residential side of things for Woodville. Whereas in Pahiatua, it's more about the residential space and understanding that down there. So it's kind of a little bit specific to each context.
Thank you for that. Any further questions before Daniel has to go on? There was dead, but. Hey, look, thanks for taking the time out, Dan, to meet with us. It's always good to see you, even if it is on screen. And yeah, we look forward to you juggling all the the little bits and pieces that you're juggling. So thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, I guess just as a closing comment, I think Amy and myself, we're very comfortable, and Adele as well. We're really happy with where the growth strategy is coming to and excited to bring it to the table and present it and sort of, as I say, capture those pictures, because of a strong sort of push, and Amy will attest to this. I'm really pushing to capture the aspirational side of where council wants our district to go over the next wee while. So excited to lay that platform and then, you know, start to implement it through the district plan. So yeah, we'll keep in touch.
Anything further, Amy?
That's exciting. It is going to be a great strategy once we get there, but we just have to be a little bit patient.
Make sure we've got everything in it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, we'll continue with other elements in that report.
We've also, in the management update, pulled through an update on the long-term plan progress. Although that particular item is reported through another committee, we believe the strategic aspect is relevant for this committee, and certainly the work that Kailani's led for us with our engagement piece has been quite successful, and we wanted to highlight that for you guys through this report, just to showcase some of the stuff that's been occurring in that space. And Kailani is in the room if you've got any other feedback or questions.
Could you come up, Kailani, because I do have some questions. Tony, are you finished talking? Because we can hear you.
Sorry, it was just the rain day was relevant, Madam Chair.
Oh, well, I'll ask the question first. So as an aside, at morning tea time, I thanked Kailani and the team for all the effort that had gone into our pre-engagement of the LTP. From my perspective, I've certainly seen a lot of positive interaction, and I think it'll be useful if you're able to perhaps update us on. Well, we heard from Karsten last week about the number of submissions and what stage that's at, but yeah, can you just kind of give us the context to closing off that loop, Kailani? But and then I'll seek some input from councillors on the process.
Yeah, so we've got all of our submissions. It's quite a process of entering them all into our online platform, Your Say Tararua, so that we can gather the results of that feedback, just so we can see those focus areas that the community has given us. The last time I checked, it's what you would expect it to be. They want to see more money in roading, water infrastructure, and parks and reserves. Those were the top three. And they want to cut funding or reduce spending, to community buildings. Yep, community buildings, libraries, and service centres. Yep, that's the ones. And then, but there's lots of really good feedback, written feedback of things that people want to see. So when it comes to when that's ready to be presented, I think it would be very beneficial for everyone to have a read of all of those comments, and that will be ready at the workshop at the end of this month.
I just have one other question, Kailani. Which mode has been the most responded to? Has it been the feedback forms? Has it been the website? Have Your Say, whatever? What's been the?
It's been the events by far. Yeah, so it's been on the forms. But the forms that we did at the events, that's where we got most of our feedback. Yeah.
Any questions or comments for
Leilani. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. I just wanted to, I guess, add a comment, and I thought it was a fantastic process. It was really, really well managed by the team. So thank you very much for that. I think what I valued, one, excited that we got the amount of feedback that we did, but also gave an opportunity for, and this is speaking personally, to actually be able to talk to people in different towns. Because of the structure, it wasn't just standing up in a hall and someone puts up their hand and asks one question. Actually being able to take the time to have 5 or 10 minutes or longer in some cases with people was incredibly valuable. So I've heard lots of stories. I'm pretty new on council and heard lots of stories about engagement, and sometimes there's more councillors and staff that arrive than actually people to consult with. I found it incredibly valuable, and it shows that we're actually genuinely trying to find different new ways of engaging with people. So well done to you and to the team. Thank you.
Questions? Obviously, we'll be closing the loop with the data and the feedback coming back to us at a workshop. Is that where it's going to take place? So, yeah, but no, well done. I don't know how many bags of sausages you went through, but Councillor Wallace.
Have we got one to go in Northwood? No. Why I asked was we're doing something out there on Labour weekend, and the question was said you'll be getting a chance to, and they'll want to consult with you in bits and pieces. So, is it Northwood not included in Labour weekend?
October has.
Yeah, I spoke with Northwood prior to the planning all of the events and gave them the opportunity to if they had anything going on that we could attend, and it was only the Labour weekend one, but that was outside of our dates that we had available, and this would have been back in July that I was speaking with them, but there was nothing going on between, because we were consulting over August and September. So there was nothing that was planned for that.
No, supplementary. The reason I ask is we are going out there for the day, and I just want to make sure we're armed with the right messages from this council.
Councillor Wallace, I think that is around the community plans and socialising that with the Woodville Northwood community, because Kimberly's done some work on that.
Long.
Through you, Chair Sharon, are you accepting late submissions on the long-term plan?
Just because this was the engagement period, we stopped accepting the submissions on Friday last week. So we officially closed the week previously. We had a grace period last week accepting some, but it is closed just so we have that time to gather all of that feedback and collate it all so that we can present it.
Yeah, thanks, Kailani. It does affect our timelines. We do need to be working on the budget so that we can pull the document together, but the community will get another opportunity when we go out and consult early next year.
Thank you, well done. Thank you very much for that update. Anything else, Mr. Poor? I see Jim has joined us. Is he speaking to anything? No, he's just putting his notes. Okay, anything else on that report today you wish to speak specifically? In which case we will get the recommendation that we receive the report. Over, please. Councillor Petty Webber and Councillor, was that Chase? Yeah. All those in favour? Thank you. Right. Thank you for moving around a little bit on that one, Angela. So if you can come up and speak to us to your paper. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Got it, okay.
So it is an update at this stage. We're not bringing anything to you. So those lists, those spreadsheets will show an X in the boxes where the committee meetings that we will bring the specific bylaws and policies to, and some of them coming through in November. So have any questions about policies that are on the list or when they're coming or?
I have a question, Angela. I mean, it's great to see the spreadsheet, but there's a lot of X's. And I think it's important that we as a committee discuss with you and Jim what the process will be, because potentially if you look at that spreadsheet, we could be very busy in November.
So do you have any views as to how this process will be managed in a way that we're not reviewing 10 bylaws in one committee meeting or anything like that?
Okay, so what I was thinking when we first developed this spreadsheet process, the X marks a point where we are going to bring some information to you because those policies or bylaws are in a process. So the review that we bring to you, it may be an update to say, for example, on the bylaw reviews, that the cemeteries and keeping of animals are going to be put in front of you, but then there's an update on the public places and alcohol bylaws to say where they're at in the review process. So it could be a mix. It's not necessarily that, for example, on the bylaw reviews, that all 4 will come in front of you on that one day, but it might. So it's it is an update. Yeah. Okay. Well, you say.
Good morning. Through the chair. So what we're hoping to do at the moment, we've got, we're reviewing the bylaws in 2 to 3 tranches. So we're not going to inundate the councillors with a bunch of them all at once. And we also have to work in with the comms, obviously, with consultation, public consultation. We don't want to overdose everybody when they've got LTP consultation and everything else going on. So our cunning plan is to is to hopefully bring 4 or 5 bylaws, probably 4. I know that Peter Wimsett is working on the water supply bylaw independently, so that I really, I'm not working with that one, but the ones that we're reviewing right now is the cemeteries bylaw, the keeping of animals bylaw, public places, and the alcohol bylaw. And as I said, water supply is underway as well with Peter. So the cemeteries bylaw is actually complete. However, we may be making a few slight changes to that one. So where we want to be at is hopefully in November we can have a relatively polished version, draft, for councillors to look at to then give approval for consultation, so that we're aiming for February for the first 4 to go out. Some of them need a bit of work in the enforcement areas so that we actually have teeth to be able to enforce certain things that are occurring in the community at the moment, which we haven't got covered. But there are other bylaws that may be just a quick review and they'll be fine. There's also a couple of bylaws that we're looking to merge inside existing bylaws. So trading in public places, for example, we're hoping to put into public places. So trading in public places will become extinct. And what else have we have? We did dog control, the dog control bylaw in the policy last year. We previously did the litter policy. Malcolm did the gambling policy, and we've introduced an enforcement policy. So there are a couple of policies that are expiring that we need to do. One is the dangerous and sanitary buildings policy. So we've tacked them on as well, because they'll need to go for consultation at the same time. So all in all, in our 2-year time frame, we're hoping to have them all done and dusted by 18-month mark, and we're on track at the moment. They'll be legally reviewed too before they get to you as a draft.
Any questions for Jim or Angela? I just wanted to make sure that, we're not drowning under But I had a reassurance from Adele that the agenda will be appropriately manageable when it comes in front of us. So do appreciate the thinking that's going on. We don't want to not have these bylaws and all policies reviewed in time, but also recognise that, yeah, it needs to be done in a manageable way. So thank you for that. Any questions for Angela or Jim? Okay, we'll look forward to, in particular, the dog control one. I'm sure will be quite a.
We did that last.
Oh, we've done that.
10-year timeframe now. I'll see you in 10 years.
Taking me a while. Right, awesome. Right, thank you very much. Now, what do we need to do for that one? We receive the report. Could I have a Kerry, Councillor Sutherland and Councillor Gilmore? All those in favour? Thank you very much for that. Right, where are we on the agenda? Had policy update, management update. Oops. There were no items on the agenda, so we'll come to.
Oh, look at you. You've got 5 minutes. Come to the closure. It's all right, I have.
So thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to close us with a very small karakia, which given what's happening overseas in Israel and Palestine is probably very appropriate. So I'll just bring us together in prayer. Kia tau te rangamārie, ki runga i ngā iwi o te ao. Let your peace reign on all the people of the world. Amen. Thank you, everyone. We will be holding another strategy planning and growth committee meeting in November. We've got still a bit of stuff to get through, so we want to make sure we've made some pretty big calls before the end of the year. So thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Adele. Well done.